City Center Radio. It is episode 222, and I am your host, Christian Sanger. Today is Monday, February 12th, 2024. Love the number two. So this episode, having three number twos, must mean it's going to be pretty great, right? Of course it is. Perhaps even super. Yes, it's the Monday after the Super Bowl. Of course, this is being recorded before the game happens, so I have no idea as I'm recording this who was victorious, what happened, how it all went, but I'm sure it was a spectacle no matter what. So if you watched it, went to a party, or stayed at home, whatever you did for it, I hope you had a good time and the game was enjoyable for you. In addition to, as usual, episodes, of course, are recorded before, they come out a day before, as I've mentioned many times. But Sunday was shaping up to be a pretty busy day for me. I was planning, of course, on watching the Super Bowl. But what was really going to put a dent in my schedule was the plan, as I'm recording this on Saturday evening, is to head up to Columbia to see my UConn Huskies take on the Gamecocks women's basketball game. Hopefully that turned out to be a good game as well. Again, I have no idea. We're recording this beforehand. Gamecocks were number 1 going into the game, and UConn, I believe, number 11. So a top 25 showdown should hopefully be a very good game. And I'm looking forward to making the trip into enemy territory, as it were. So yes, recording this even earlier than normal. I say that, just in case, not just Super Bowl related, but any news, if anything breaks late Saturday evening, in anything on Sunday itself won't be included. So if there's some big story or, what have you, we'll talk about it on the next episode. But that just wanted to put that caveat in there that if there is something big that happened, that is why it's not being talked about. So with that said, let's get into some of the latest news. This one was somewhat surprising. Shortly after the South Carolina Senate made some changes to the so-called constitutional carry bill, allowing basically anyone over the age of 18 to carry a gun anywhere at any time, except, of course, at places like the State House where the people making this decision work. The House Republicans decided they're not going to take up that amended version. So a slight surprise. I thought this would have gone through pretty cleanly. So the House passed a version of it, went to the state Senate. They made some changes to it. And that because of that, it has to go back to the House. And the South Carolina House Republicans decided they didn't like the changes and they're not going to take up the bill. So the Senate passed the bill originally 28-15, bringing South Carolina even closer, to this so-called constitutional carry nonsense. But however, House Majority Leader Davey Hyatt, who's a Republican from Pickens, said he believes the bill in the House's original form is a better reflection of what constituents are seeking. This, according to him, of course. Is that true? Hard to know what the entire state actually thinks about it, but he is of the belief that this is what people want. He went on to say in a statement posted to Twitter that he respected the intentions and efforts of the Senate, but the House Republican caucus remains united in their decision to not agree with the Senate's changes, so they won't be taking it up. He went on to say things like, their dedication to protecting the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens remains steadfast. It is their firm belief that the bill in its original form best reflects the fundamental rights and freedoms of our constituents. So wait till you see the changes if you don't remember that apparently they take issue with. So this so-called constitutional carry, which is also known as House Bill 3594, was introduced by Representative Bobby Cox, a Republican from Greenville, last year. Now, the Senate's amended bill, that's the one that the House Republicans have decided, we don't like these changes. These are the changes that they put into there. They added penalties for unregistered firearm owners who break weapons statutes. Seems like a no-brainer there. If you don't register your firearm and then break a law, you should have a penalty for it. Okay, they have a problem with that for some reason. One of the other changes mandated that citizens report stolen weapons to local police. Once again, seems like a good idea, not just in general for the safety of the community, but I would think a weapons owner, if your weapon is stolen, you'd want to report it stolen, number one, for your own purposes, however, maybe it gets found, you get your weapon back. Maybe you have insurance that will cover the cost of a stolen item. But also, again, safety for the community as well, knowing that a weapon's been stolen, to be aware of it, because likely if a weapon's stolen, it's going to be used in a crime. Which also would benefit the person reporting their gun stolen. So when their gun is used in a crime, it doesn't come back on them. That just seems like common sense. And I would imagine most weapons owners, assuming they're not illegally owning a weapon, would probably just report it to the police when it's stolen anyway. But apparently they had a problem with that being mandated. Okay. And then the other thing they put into this bill was they were offering free weapons training, not requiring it, just offering free training, since this bill was going to take away the requirement that anyone who wanted to carry a gun go through this weapons training for safety purposes. Apparently, the House Republicans don't like any of those things, because those were the changes, and they're not even going to take up this bill, they said, saying that the original bill is what people want. I don't understand this at all. Obviously, I'm not a fan of the bill anyway, so that should not be a shock to anybody. But the fact that these seemingly innocuous, common sense items were added to it, I'm just shocked that they wouldn't take these up. Like, this is the problem. People who don't register their firearms and break statutes get punished, added penalties in addition to whatever, the crime is. They have a problem with that. They have a problem with citizens having to report weapons that were stolen, and they have a problem with free weapons training that's not required to even participate in. I honestly don't get it. If it was in line, if there was something added to it that maybe made it more difficult for someone to get a weapon, I wouldn't necessarily agree that the House Republicans didn't like that, but at least I would understand where they were coming from. They are very much seemingly to be of the belief that anyone over the age of 18 should be able to have a weapon as long as they haven't been convicted of a felony. They're pretty clear on that. They don't like any obstacles. That's why they're pushing this bill where you don't even have to go through safety training anymore. So again, I would disagree, but at least I'd be like, well, yeah, I saw that coming. That tracks with, their belief system. These things do not make it harder for someone to get a weapon. These things don't prevent anybody from getting a weapon. These are things meant to protect the community and to ensure that anybody who has a gun has the option to get free training. So if cost is a concern, they don't have to worry about that. And now they've gotten free safety training, which makes them a better gun owner, makes it safer for them and anyone who interacts with them. If a weapon is stolen, it should be reported. I just don't, it doesn't track with what I know. It's like, any changes that are made, even by their own party, they just want to be obstinate about it and just be like, nope, that's not what we want. I don't get it. None of these things make the community safer. Obviously, I don't believe constitutional carry is a good idea, and I don't think it makes community safer on its face. But the Senate at least tried to put in some things that would help out with safety, that would not prevent anyone from owning a gun, would not infringe on anyone's rights in any way. You couldn't even twist it into an infringement on rights. You know how some people will do that with certain laws related to guns. It just seems like a dereliction of duty. It seems unnecessary that these common sense measures that were just put in place for safety purposes, excuse me, are being ignored and being said, nah, we don't want that in the bill. That's not what our citizens want. It's just irresponsible is the least of what it is. Sticking with the state legislature, they are attempting to bring politics into the school board. I mean, we already know politics is in it already. That's a little misleading, but they're trying to make it official. A new bill, House Bill 5052, would make it that school board candidates' political beliefs would have to be on the ballot. So basically, anyone who runs for a school board would have to say, I'm a Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever political party they believe they are in, they would have to report it. This is being suggested by Representative Jordan Pace, a Republican from Berkeley County, who has been vocal about specifically the Charleston County School Board and some of that, craziness we've seen from them. He's even said that as part of his reasoning, saying that as we've seen in South Carolina, throughout the state and really for the last several decades, people believe any way that they can, and that's fine, but they kind of sneak in through nonpartisan elections by saying, oh, no, I'm not far left or far right. And we've been seeing that, that's happened, like he said, for decades, I'm sure. But we're really seeing it because Moms for Liberty candidates are getting in, and these are extreme far right candidates. And so it's just become a little bit more obvious. You've gone from people who clearly lean one way or the other, but it's just when you get an extremist on the board, it's even more obvious of what's occurred. And a lot of these folks were not talking about politics, which, to be honest, they shouldn't be. School boards shouldn't be partisan, but they are. And because they've become so partisan, and we've seen extremist groups try to push candidates into these positions, it's time to, I think, and I agree with Representative Pace here, it's time to put their political beliefs, their party at least, obviously nothing more in depth than that, but their party needs to be on the ballot so people can make more informed decisions. And Pace went on to say when he was talking to ABC News 4, it's better to be honest about the people making the decisions, talking about school board members, and knowing that what their ideology is and where they stand on important distinctions about what is good and bad. And parents should know that, to make sure they're voting for the appropriate candidate in their beliefs. Now, a couple people, including a Dorchester District 2 board member and a Charleston County School District constituent board member, disagree with this bill. They both basically were saying something along the lines of politics shouldn't be part of school board. Focus should be on the education of children. And again, just like Pace said, and I believe, it's too late. Politics are there. We should probably be honest about it. We should have these people running on school boards say what party they're involved with, because it's already there. It's already affecting the schools. They'll say one thing or conveniently leave out important details when they're campaigning, and we already know it's hard enough to know what exactly school board members believe in. They don't get as much coverage in the news as other races for obvious reasons. And because they're nonpartisan, some people in the past maybe have hid their true beliefs about certain things that they knew might not get them elected. And once they're there, they'll go ahead and try to institute what they want. So we'll see what happens with this bill. I think it's a good idea. I think it makes sense in our current climate that we need to know who these folks on the board are and what they believe, because increasingly we're seeing these decisions that are being made that a lot of people are like, wait a minute, I wouldn't have voted for this person if I knew that this is what they were going to do when they were on the board. And if they had known the political associations that they had, they could have, even if the person didn't outright say the types of stuff they were going to do when they got on the board, you can make an educated assumption about what they'll possibly do given, what party they're associate themselves with and what's currently going on in the nation is in regards to each party. So I think this is a good idea. It needs to be filed so people can make better decisions and, figure out which candidates are actually going to get into a role and do what's right for students. And again, I get that we don't want politics on the school board, but it's far too late for that. This is another story about something that's making its way through the legislature. I think it's interesting. There hasn't been an update on it in a while, but it has to do with misinformation and specifically what are called deep fakes. Bill H 4660 would ban the use of deep fake media 90 days out from an election unless otherwise disclosed by the affected person. State Representative Jermaine Johnson, who is in District 70, is leading the charge on this bill. And basically just saying it's getting harder and harder to decipher between what's real and what's fake nowadays because of all these different technologies, whether it's AI, and other deep fakes include videos that look like a person is saying something, it's in their voice and everything, or there's a recording, as we just saw recently in the national news, where I think it was New Hampshire, leading up to one of the primaries. There was a robocall going around that was Joe Biden's voice, but it wasn't actually him. For those who don't know, this technology exists now where you can upload or log into it, these different websites, and especially with famous people because their voice is all over, recordings, TV, whatever it may be, and you can make something in their voice. For instance, I can make a fake Joe Biden sound clip where it sounds like he's talking about how great this podcast is. And yeah, you might notice a couple things where like, that sounded a little off as far as like, it didn't sound necessarily how that person may speak. But for the most part, it sounds legit, and you're like, oh, that actually sounds like it's real. So it's becoming, after that incident with the fake Biden voice on the robocalls, it's definitely something people are starting to get concerned with. Specifically, I've already kind of explained it, but deepfake media is the idea of mimicking the likeness or mannerisms of another person through images, audio, or video recordings. Now, under this proposed legislation, any person caught impersonating a candidate or deterring voters from the polls using this fake, deepfake media could face up to 90 days in prison and a $500 fine for a first offense. After that, it gets bumped up to 5 years for a second offense and $1,000 fine and up to 5 years in prison for a third offense. So they're definitely taking it seriously in the proposal. So far, there hasn't really been any movement on this bill, but I will certainly keep you updated. It's an all politics edition of the podcast. This is another story about proposed legislation. Specifically, the South Carolina House has passed what's basically called an alcohol delivery bill. And a company who specializes in deliveries, DoorDash, has released a statement in support of this legislation. DoorDash, of course, is the only type of company that does deliveries from restaurants or maybe in some instances like a grocery store, sometimes like a pharmacy, a Walgreens, a CVS. There's Uber Eats as well. Now, House Bill 4364 was passed in the House this past Thursday. As I mentioned, DoorDash released a statement supporting this legislation. And here is basically what it would do. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Just anytime you order from say a grocery store and you're getting your groceries, you now would be able to order alcohol as well, and the delivery person would bring it just like any of your other groceries. This is legal in some other states, but South Carolina has barred it. So no pun intended with the use of the term bar. But yes, if this is passed by the Senate and then ultimately, of course, Governor McMaster, if he decides to sign it, it would allow those companies or any other similar ones to be able to deliver alcohol. There's actually several alcohol retailers that have said they're supportive of the measure on the business end. That obviously makes a lot of sense for them. It's another chance for them to make money. But they have expressed some concerns about liability issues. Advocates have said that there are safeguards in place for alcohol delivery, such as requiring an ID scan from a third-party vendor before orders are able to be completed. So the bill heads to the Senate, as I mentioned, for debate. We'll see what happens there, and I'll certainly keep you updated on any movements on that legislation. So that'll do it for this edition of Holy City Center Radio. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week. Like I said at the top, I recorded this on Saturday evening. So if there's any big stories, updates, anything else that you were expecting me to talk about, it'll have to wait until the next episode, as this was recorded before whatever that incident or news event may be, including the Super Bowl result. And the Gamecocks, did the women remain undefeated and beat UConn, or did the Huskies upset them? I don't know. We'll have to wait and find out. When you're listening to this podcast, you'll know the answers. But any big updates, we'll be sure to talk about in the next podcast, which is scheduled to come out on Wednesday as usual. So in addition to hoping you had a good weekend, I hope your week ahead is pleasant as well. I want to thank you for listening. If you want to take an extra step and help out the podcast, you can do things like go to patreon.com/holycitysinner, where you can sign up for one of those support tiers. You can also rate this podcast, review it, subscribe to it on whatever platform you're listening on. That helps out as well. I also need to thank Lindsay Marie Collins with LMC Soundsystem for producing this and every episode of Holy City Center Radio, and Tyler Boone, whose music you hear on each and every show as well. Until Wednesday, good night and good luck.